My story starts in a place I never thought I'd see again. Sycamore Lodge, my grandparents' old property nestled deep in the woods. After they passed away, I hadn't thought much of it. The house had fallen into disrepair, and we rarely went there. But one cold October evening, my mom asked if I could spend the weekend there to make sure the property was still secure. The road leading to the lodge was quiet and overgrown, and by the time I arrived, the sun was setting. The house loomed in front of me, its cracked windows and creaky wooden boards glowing under the twilight. As I made my way inside, a strange feeling settled over me. The place felt different, heavier somehow. I chalked it up to the loneliness and silence. Inside, everything was as I remembered, down to the dusty armchair by the fireplace and the faint scent of lavender from my grandmother's old sachets. I started to settle in, preparing myself for a quiet night with just the sound of the wind against the windows, when I heard a faint noise from upstairs. A slow, dragging sound. I froze, listening, trying to rationalize it. It could have been an animal in the attic, or just the wind shifting the old beams. But the noise grew louder, heavier, like something being dragged across the floor. "Hello?" I called out, feeling a bit silly, but hoping for silence. Instead, the dragging sound stopped abruptly, replaced by a soft tapping. 4 deliberate taps, like fingernails on wood. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Telling myself I was imagining things, I checked my phone, realizing with a sinking feeling that I had no signal. Of course. The tapping continued, each beat slow and deliberate, growing louder as I stood frozen in place. I tried to brush it off, forcing myself to laugh. "Old house sounds, right?" I muttered, trying to convince myself, but my hands were shaking. I decided to explore upstairs, hoping that finding the source of the noise would put my mind at ease. The staircase creaked under my weight, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I reached the landing, I glanced down the long hallway lined with closed doors. The tapping sound stopped, but I could swear I heard faint breathing. Pushing down my fear, I opened the first door. Inside was the guest bedroom, untouched, with a bed draped in a white sheet and a thin layer of dust coating every surface. Nothing seemed out of place, so I moved on to the next door. Each room was the same, empty, cold, and eerily silent. Finally, I reached the last door, my grandparents' old bedroom. As I pushed it open, a gust of cold air hit me, carrying with it a faint scent I hadn't smelled in years. My grandmother's lavender perfume. My heart pounded as I stepped inside, feeling the temperature drop even further. That's when I noticed something on the bed, a photo album lying open. The pages were turned to a picture of me as a kid, playing in the front yard of this very house. But something was wrong. I was there in the photo, laughing, but in the background, behind the trees, there was a dark figure standing, barely visible in the shadows. I didn't remember anyone being there when that photo was taken. I shut the album quickly, my heart racing. I didn't know why, but I felt like I was intruding, like someone didn't want me here. And then, as if on cue, the dragging sound started up again. This time closer, louder, like it was right outside the door. I slammed the bedroom door shut, pressing my back against it, trying to steady my breathing. Silence fell, but I knew I wasn't alone. My eyes darted around the room, landing on a cracked mirror across from me. At first, I saw only my reflection, pale and wide-eyed. But then, slowly, another figure appeared behind me in the mirror, a tall, shadowy shape with hollow eyes. I spun around, but there was nothing there. The room was empty. But when I looked back into the mirror, the figure was still there, closer now, its empty eyes staring directly into mine. I felt frozen, unable to move as it lifted a bony hand, pointing at me. A voice, faint and raspy, echoed in my mind. "You shouldn't be here." I bolted from the room, slamming the door behind me. I raced down the stairs, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might burst. But as I reached the front door, I saw that it was wide open, and standing in the doorway was the same figure from the mirror. It was closer now, more defined. I could make out tattered clothing, long fingers, and a face that seemed to shift and blur. As I stood there, paralyzed with fear, the figure lifted its hand, pointing back toward the hallway. "You forgot something," it whispered, in a voice so cold it felt like ice against my skin. I backed away, terrified, but the figure didn't move. I realized with a sinking feeling that it was standing right where my grandmother's room would have been in the reflection. The figure was waiting, blocking my escape. I turned, compelled to look down the hall where the figure had pointed. There, in the shadows, I saw something on the floor, a small locket, one I hadn't seen in years. It was my grandmother's, the one she used to wear every day. I didn't know how it had ended up here, lying in the dust, but I felt an urge to pick it up, like it was calling to me. I crept forward, my steps slow and hesitant, the figure in the doorway watching my every move. As I bent down to grab the locket, I heard the voice again, right in my ear, as if someone were standing inches from me. "Come home, Emily," it whispered. "Come home." As I reached down to pick up the locket, my fingers barely brushed its surface before a bone-chilling cold crept up my arm, paralyzing me. It was as if the very essence of the lodge had grabbed onto me, refusing to let go. The air thickened, pressing down on my chest, making it almost impossible to breathe. A voice, my grandmother's voice, whispered, soft and desperate, right in my ear. "Emily, don't!" I jolted back, heart pounding, the locket slipping from my fingers. But as soon as I backed away, the shadowy figure by the door seemed to grow darker, angrier. Its hollow eyes glared at me, its face distorting as it stepped forward, the twisted shape of its body contorting with each step. Suddenly, I heard the dragging sound again, louder this time, echoing from every corner of the house. It was coming closer, the sound reverberating like nails scraping over concrete. The walls began to tremble, and I felt the whole house pulse, as if it were alive, its very structure groaning in agony. "Emily, come with me." The voice shifted now, no longer my grandmother's gentle tone, but something guttural and unnatural, echoing from the walls. I stumbled backward, too terrified to turn my back on the figure, feeling as though I'd stepped into some twisted nightmare. In a final, desperate attempt to escape, I sprinted for the front door. But as soon as I reached it, I was met with the icy grip of invisible hands wrapping around my ankles, pulling me down. I clawed at the floor, my fingers scraping against the old wooden boards, splinters digging into my skin, but the force was relentless, dragging me back into the dark hallway. Panicked, I turned, catching a glimpse of the figure towering over me. It leaned down, face inches from mine, its empty eyes boring into my soul. It reached out a hand, one long, bony finger pointing to the open bedroom door at the end of the hall. "Finish what you started," it hissed, its voice a harsh whisper that sounded like 100 voices layered over each other. With no other choice, I crawled forward, feeling the oppressive weight of its gaze on me, guiding me toward the room. When I reached the doorway, I looked inside, my heart pounding in terror. The once empty room was now filled with shadowy figures, each one wearing an expression of agony, their mouths open in silent screams. In the center of the room, a tall mirror reflected not just the room, but a dark forest beyond, with twisted trees and shadows that writhed like living creatures. The shadow figure behind me forced me into the room, and as I stumbled inside, I felt the temperature drop even further. The figures in the mirror turned to look at me, their eyes empty, hollow like the figure that had haunted me. My reflection in the mirror twisted, shifting until I no longer recognized myself. I was a part of the forest, a shadow among shadows, trapped within its eternal darkness. With a final agonized scream, I felt myself pulled forward, my vision blurring as I plunged into the icy depths of the mirror. The last thing I heard before everything went black was the faint whisper of my grandmother's voice. "I tried to warn you." The world beyond the mirror was unlike anything I'd ever known. I was no longer in the house, yet I felt its weight pressing down on me, as if I were bound to it forever. Shadows danced around me, shifting forms in a forest that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Each step I took sank into cold, damp earth, and twisted trees loomed over me, their branches resembling skeletal fingers reaching out. The whispering started again, faint at first, but soon it grew into a chorus of familiar voices. My grandmother's was among them, pleading softly. "Emily, you need to leave." But the other voices drowned her out, hissing angrily, urging me to stay. I felt their cold presence surrounding me, their eyes invisible yet fixed upon me. I tried to run, but no matter where I turned, the forest twisted, each path leading me back to the same spot. The figure from the lodge appeared again, towering and dark, but now it was clearer, more horrifying. Its face was twisted into a grotesque smile, and in its hand it held the locket, dangling from a chain as if taunting me. Desperate, I lunged for the locket, but as soon as my fingers brushed it, I felt a searing pain shoot through me, like ice burning into my bones. The figure leaned closer, whispering, "Now you're with us. Forever." And as it spoke, I felt myself fading, my own form blurring and dissolving, as though I was becoming part of the very shadows that trapped me. In the distance, I heard my grandmother's voice one last time, a faint echo lost in the darkness. "I tried to save you, but it's too late." And then there was only silence.